Hi, everybody. So my name is Anna. I am an intern here with the WILD program through PSU's outdoor program. Thank you for coming and watching our workshop or our COVID workshop. Yeah, we're going to just talk about briefly the good Portland areas to climb and what you can expect from each of those climbing areas. I'll pass it off to Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris, also with the Portland State Outdoor Adventure Program. And like Anna said, this is our COVID kind of workshop, and we want to explain a little bit more about the Portland area climbing locations for those that are moving into the area or people that are just kind of transitioning from gyms to outdoor crags. And our focus on this was mostly the crags that are within 2 hours or less of Portland area. Most everybody already knows about Smith, but we wanted to kind of expand on the stuff that's kind of local outside of Smith, since Smith's about 2 hours and 40 minutes away from Portland. And there are more than areas than what we have put into this particular slideshow, but these are the primary ones that are popular and or are at least somewhat close and well developed. So I'll hand it back over to Anna.
Awesome. Okay, then we'll go ahead and get into the first location. All right, so this is Rocky Butte. It's probably our closest location. It's about 15 or 20 minutes away from downtown. So if you live in Portland, it's a quick jaunt over. It's pretty easy access to the top. It's like a 30-second approach. I know there's a homeless camp there, so it's a little bit of there's a little bit of things to avoid, and it's very urban if you're into that kind of climbing. And then there's also like a few roads that are very close.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's mostly basalt, and while you can lead a lot of the routes, it's actually very popular for top rope soloing, and also kind of a good intro for people setting up top ropes, because it's extremely easy access to the top there to the anchors, whether it's a tree or a lot of bolts. It's basalt, so lots of crack, and then of course some very hard sport climbs at this location. It does often need a lot of help in picking up trash, needles, unfortunately, and a lot of other stuff at the top and at the base. So I know a lot of local climbers try to gather groups to go out there pretty regularly to help take care of the crag. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right, this next one is Bringin Bluffs. This is a really good one. I've been there a couple of times. Yeah, it's fairly close. It's right off the highway. It's in like Lewis and Clark State Park, I believe is the name. It's like 35 minutes away from downtown. It's pretty popular. I've been there on a Saturday, and most of the routes are there's people waiting in lines to get on the crack, especially in like the warmer months, like summertime, springtime. Yeah, from what I remember, the tie-in points are a little bit hard to get to. Yeah, but it's still very doable. It's a good spot for beginners. It's very vertical. Like there's not a lot of like sloping kind of rock. So yeah, it's a good spot to climb.
Yeah, absolutely. Another close spot over in Troutdale. Again, the rock's basalt, so you're gonna get a lot of crack climbing. But there is a lot of sport and trad. Some of the routes can be accessed from the top for setting up top ropes if you prefer that. And as well, it is very popular. So I usually avoid this place on the weekends and go more towards weekdays. Again, like Anna said, it's popular during the summer because it has a lot of shade at the base. So very good. And then of course, right across the street from the park is the river. So nice place to cool off on a hot day. It does have some limited parking, so if it's popular on the weekends, you might have a difficult time actually getting in and actually even parking. The approach is slightly steep and can be a little loose, especially if it has rained recently and has washed away a lot of the dirt. Again, another spot where a lot of local climbers try to get out there and do trail maintenance, so there are a lot of groups that get together to go out there and help keep the area up. That way all of us climbers have good approach trails, and then also clean routes to climb that way that are safe.
Awesome. The next one, this is called the Rat Cave. It's about 40 minutes from downtown, give or take. It's crag for some local crushers, which means it's pretty hard. Yeah, I haven't been there before, but yeah, from what I know, it's pretty hard climbing.
Yeah, very hard climbing. This is out along the river, so you take the highway outside of town up closer to the gorge. Very difficult climbing here, almost all overhanging routes. The easiest route there is in the 511A B-ish range. Not a lot of routes there, but not very popular just because of the type of routes that they have there are all hard sport overhanging. Draws are perma draws. So most of the stuff there is bolted and has draws hanging on it year round. So if you do go out there and you try to hop on these, I would definitely bring a stick clip and know how to clip a perma draw. And then on top of that, just check the gear before you actually climb it. I think a year and a half to 2 years ago, there was one of the perma draws that someone took a fall on and the entire rock came out from the roof, but luckily everybody was okay and they were able to walk away from it. So it might be fixed gear. Just make sure you're checking the fixed gear if you go out there and climb.
Okay. All right, the next one, Carver Madrone. It's about 45-50 minutes from downtown, so you're getting into like more of the drive time territory where it's taking a little bit longer to get out there, even though 50 minutes is pretty doable for most Portlanders. It's mostly sport with a few like trad routes. Yeah, it's got some seasonal closure for raptor nesting, and there's like a little bit of limited parking, but it's still a great spot to climb.
Yes, this is two places that are in pretty close proximity. That's why they're on the same slide. So Carver is private property and Madrone is part of, I believe, a state park. Don't quote me on that. Madrone is the one that will have seasonal closures and Carver will be open year round. But since Carver is on private property, you do actually need to go online, sign up to be a member, and then actually sign a waiver and print out a card and bring it with you when you go to Carver. Carver is at the base, the base of Carver is at the restaurant, and they ask you not to climb there, especially on weekends and busy weekends. That way they can have it for their customers instead of climbers. There's a lot of poison oak there, so be wary at both of those locations when hiking on the approach or even climbing. I've seen some poison oak. Some of the routes there are quite difficult and overhanging, and you might not realize how difficult the climb is when looking at it until you get on it. Some of the stuff is sandbagged, so you might just be wary when starting up a route there and read a little bit more of the notes if you happen to have Mountain Project. Other than that, the two very good locations, and especially since they're close to town here, being just south of Portland. So highly recommend this location.
Awesome. Next one's going to be Ozone. I've heard of Ozone, never been, but I know it's very, very popular. It's about 50 minutes from downtown. They've got over 200 routes. So you have a lot of area to choose from, and a lot of different kinds of routes to choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very popular. I usually avoid this place on the weekends as well, just because you will often have to wait in line. Even with the number of routes that are there being over 200 routes along the base of the climb, a lot of the routes are more difficult and those will be empty, but not everybody can climb 512 and 513. So the 5.7 to 5.10 range in routes are going to have somebody on them. And then on top of that, if you're towards the middle of the wall, the routes will be very long and do require a 70-meter rope. And even with the 70, make sure that you're putting a knot in the end of your rope just so you don't get lowered off the end of it. Other than that, there's a good mix of traditional routes and sport routes. If you're going to be climbing sport there and on some of the longer routes, make sure you take at least 14 draws with you. A lot of the anchors do have mussy hooks, so it's very easy to lower off of, but please don't top rope on the fixed gear. Bring your own gear and make sure that you're setting up your own anchors to top rope, so that way we don't wear out all of the fixed gear that people have paid for. So Awesome.
All right. Next one is Beacon Rock. This was pretty good. It's about an hour from downtown. I've been on this climbing, like hiking behind it, but I've never climbed on it. There's actually a really nice, really short hike on the back if you want to, do some climbing and then pop over and do some hiking to finish off your day. It's very tall. We recommend a 70-meter rope, and of course putting knots in that. And then there's over 100 routes, so we've got quite a few to choose from, but not as much as like Ozone or Broughton.
Yeah, this is definitely the preeminent multi-pitch location that's close to Portland. Mostly traditional with lots of bolted anchors, almost all bolted anchors, in fact. Not all, but there you will get a couple of multi-pitch routes that don't have bolted anchors. You just make sure you know what you're hopping on before you do. Currently, right now, I think until August, maybe July, a lot of the routes are closed due to raptor nesting. There are 2 areas that are currently open during the summer. They can be a little dirty and a little tough, very interesting routes, I will say. I'll leave it at that. And the 70 meter is often for coming back down. In order to wrap the routes, you need a 70 or a tagline. Usually 70 works for most everything there. There is poison oak on the approach, and if you're doing some of the longer multi-pitch routes, there will be poison oak on the route as well. This sits kind of right next to the river and right next to the railroad track, so it can be a little bit noisy and also cooler than you would think since it's so close to the river. Other than that, very short approach. It's the parking lot is just on what you're seeing on the screen there, just to the left. You actually approach going downhill for most of the climbing. And if you're going to be topping out, you'll actually top out, and then there'll be a trail to walk back down, which is quite nice. And that trail has recently opened back up with the releasing of restrictions due to COVID.
Awesome. All right, next one is French's Dome. This one's about an hour and 20 minutes from downtown. It's a very short downhill approach. Yeah, and there's less routes. There's about 32 routes, but it's still good climbing.
Yeah, definitely lots of good climbing there. Not a ton of it. And again, another popular spot for a lot of the Portland area climbers, especially those getting into climbing, because it is pretty close, pretty well bolted, and there is one multi-pitch there. It's an easy 3-pitch route. A lot of people break it down into just 2 pitches to make it just a bit easier and faster. Other than that, you can hop on some harder routes there if you're trying to up your grades. Well bolted and with good belay stances. That way, if you're trying to work a problem, your belayer won't get bored or be on sloping, gross dirt belay stances. So also very nice. It doesn't get climbed a lot in the winter just because it gets a lot more snow since it's pretty close to Mount Hood. It is popular all year round. Other than that, if you can get through the snow, and it is cooler, so on those hot summer days, a lot of people will just head up towards Hood and climb this location because it is a lot cooler. If you happen to top out on the dome there, it's quite beautiful. Really good picture spot for Mount Hood. And then there is a wrap station off the backside, and you only need a 60-meter rope to climb this location. Just be very comfortable with getting into their rappels and either lowering your other climber if they're new.
Awesome. Okay. Next one is Salmon River. It's about an hour and 20 minutes from downtown. It's a really, really quick approach, and all of the climbing is sport. So you don't need to bring any gear, or you only need your tie-ins.
True. Yeah. Yes. Not a lot of climbing at this location with only 7 routes. It is all slab climbing. So if you're looking to head to either Yosemite or Red Rocks, it's a good place to go and practice your slab climbing. And bolted anchors all pretty good. And you can probably almost belay out of your car since the parking lot shares with where you actually flake your rope and tie in and start heading up. It's about 10 feet away. And then on the other side of the road from the slabs is the river, which is Salmon River slabs. and it's good, another good spot for summer climbing. Climb there and then just hop in the river to cool off.
Awesome. Next one is Pete's Pile or Klinger Spring. It's about an hour and 40 minutes from downtown. Really quick approach. It's kind of like a mix of like trad and sport, and you've got like a kind of middle range amount of routes. You got 80 routes to kind of mess around on.
This is another location where there are two actually locations pretty close to one another, and quite a bit further away from town on the other side of Mount Hood. So you can either get there by heading up and over Hood, or the easier way is just taking the highway down the gorge, and then from Hood River heading up on the other side of Mount Hood. The uphill approach can be a little strenuous, and obviously it does get a lot of snow in the winter, so you want to make sure it's melted out before you try to head out there. Pretty decent mix of traditional and sport climbing. Some longer routes, but you can get away with most of them with a 60-meter rope. The parking can be somewhat limited, and I have heard of some break-ins there. So just be wary of that and don't leave anything visible in your car. And actually, I would say that goes for almost everything that we've mentioned here. There have been break-ins more recently in Portland and then all the climbing areas around Portland.
Thanks for having that.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for Klinger Spring and Pete's Pile in particular, there are a lot of ticks since it's kind of in the woods, and so I've had at least a handful of ticks every time I've gone there. So just make sure you're watching for that, and you can bring bug spray if you're into that, and hopefully that'll help. So
awesome. And then that is the end of all of our places. I figured we'd end with a nice quote. Never measure the height of a mountain until you have reached the top. Then you will see how low it was. And I think that's really motivating for me as a climber. So yeah, thank you guys for coming and listening to what we have to say about all these awesome climbing routes. Hope you guys can get out there and climb soon.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully you all enjoyed this and got a lot of good information out of this. And hopefully see you at the crag. Be safe.